Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Chelsea fans. Welcome back to the Son of Chelsea podcast. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Friday, close to the end of another week, the first full week of the World Cup in Qatar. There's been a lot of football. There's been a lot of nil-nils in the competition, but there's been some good stuff as well. Getting close to Christmas as well, so if you're doing your Christmas shopping, best of luck. Particularly if you're one of those mad people who goes out and actually does the shopping physically nowadays. I am someone who just can't do that anymore. I have to go online, have to do a bit of Amazon, have to do a bit of Black Friday sales. But none of that nonsense. Let's get into the football. And I'm glad to say I've got a guest here today with me. A good friend of mine, someone who I've enjoyed working with over a year and a half, I think it is now, over at Football London. He's someone that's very popular online and rightly so for his great work. Adam Newson, chief Chelsea writer, head Chelsea writer, lead Chelsea. Even though I've worked with you, Adam, I think I've probably got that wrong. But you write about Chelsea for Football London. Welcome to the show, mate. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm good, man. I'm just I look tired. So yeah, I must say I'm enjoying the World Cup break, trying to sort of catch up on a bit of rest after what was a ridiculous schedule we had in October and November.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do get going, Son of Chelsea is a part of the 90 Min Podcast Network. If you are listening on the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on my YouTube channel, thank you as well for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you don't miss any of the uploads. And if you want to listen to it in audio form, really easy to do. Go to your favourite podcast provider, just search Son of Chelsea and the feed will be there. But let's get into it, Adam. Obviously, as we've just referenced the World Cup break. It's given us all a time to kind of reflect, take a bit of a break, have a breather, focus on some international football, get away from Chelsea, which was not a very nice environment by the time things had wrapped up at St James's Park on the Saturday before the World Cup had started. 3 consecutive defeats in the Premier League. I think it was like 4 or 5 in about as many games if you add in the League Cup defeat as well. Things that had started well for Graham Potter drastically went wrong. I mean, just watching that last run before we did get into the World Cup to start off with, what was your sort of feelings about that period and sort of the problems that emerged for Graham Potter?
It's difficult to analyse this probably fairly because of the situation that Graham Potter has faced at Chelsea so far. The run of fixtures Chelsea had was relentless, and that would have been very difficult to navigate with a fully fit squad. You add in, key injuries to Reece James, who is, I was going to say he's Chelsea's best right wing back, but it's probably Chelsea's right flank in its entirety. You include Wesley Fofana. You throw in N'Golo Kante. Obviously, Koulibaly missed a few games, and other knocks as well. It wasn't easy for Potter to really, Ben Chilwell, of course. It wasn't easy for Potter to settle upon anything in terms of a settled side, in terms of a regular sort of structure. He has been chopping and changing systems, personnel. I just think by the end of that run, sort of things caught up with Chelsea a little bit. Might have been fatigue, a bit of mental fatigue as well. And of course, defeats are not enjoyable. I think we all want to see Chelsea win games. I want to say I'm surprised at the level of vitriol almost online, but I probably am not surprised at this stage. But it has created a very, very negative atmosphere around the club at the moment. There does seem to be a very real determination from a lot of Chelsea fans to completely switch off at the moment, and I can understand that to an extent. But when Chelsea come back from the World Cup break, there is going to be a need to at least go into the games against Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest on New Year's Day, with a bit more of a positive mindset. We'll hopefully have Reece James back. We'll hopefully have Wesley Fofana back. And you just hope that things improve for Graham Potter, because, as I say, there's so much negativity at the moment. It does feel like he's basically sort of swimming against the tide at the minute, and that can't be easy for him because, as we know, this is his first big job.
Because I think the last time I had you on the channel, it was deadline day or around deadline day time. Of course, Tuchel, I think, was still in charge. I don't even think Chelsea had signed Aubameyang properly then, and Zakaria we didn't even know was going to be a thing until like the closing hours of that window. And I probably say this too much for people who listen to me, and I've said it on podcasts I've been on. If you don't have conversations with people about Chelsea for like 3 months, things drastically change. And obviously Tuchel got sacked. We know how that happened. You did a lot of great reporting at the time. I definitely suggest anyone go on Football London, read those articles, sort of the in-depth kind of breakdown of where it went wrong for Tuchel at Chelsea. But we've had conversations since obviously working together about what this kind of mood is around Chelsea, because it's sure, losing games consistently at Chelsea is freakish. It's not the norm, like losing this amount of games in a short space of time. But even after Potter's first game in charge against Salzburg, you could feel that negativity growing. And you know, my theory, as I think maybe you share, maybe you feel a little bit differently, is I think is just the madness of 2022 and the exhaustion of 2022 catching up with everyone. But quite clearly, if Chelsea are winning games, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, but I think you raise a valid point, in the sense of this year has been a year like no other supporting and following Chelsea Football Club. You know, I think a lot of psychologists would tell you that humans aren't very good at coping with change, as a general rule. And there has been a lot of change at Chelsea. And some supporters, and I don't want to just say this is a younger element of the fan base. I do think, you know, there's going to be some older supporters who feel like this too. There's almost a difficulty now identifying with the Chelsea as is. And I think to an extent that's understandable. And I say I saw this on Twitter, and I can't claim it was mine, but it was a very good quote of, you know, Chelsea, it's no longer the Chelsea of Roman Abramovich, but it's not yet the Chelsea of Todd Boehly. I do think that is true, because there is still a lot of work going on at Chelsea behind the scenes. We know the recruitment team's being put in place. There's a lot of restructuring going on aside from that in terms of the business side of things. Chelsea are not where they will be in a year under Boehly. There will be a far more slicker operation then, and hopefully a bit more sort of just a stronger structure in place and a clearer idea of where the club will be going for people to understand and sort of latch onto. Because at the moment it does feel that everyone's a little bit confused, a little bit concerned, you know, can't quite identify with Graham Potter, can't quite identify with the team. And there's going to come a point when hopefully that changes. And to do that, yes, of course, Chelsea need to be winning games, because that is what we're all here for at the end of the day. We want to see Chelsea win and win trophies. But to get to that point is going to be a journey. And at the moment, I just think there's a lot of say, confusion and just difficulty for some people to work out what Chelsea really are at the moment. And from that perspective, I can understand why it's easy for negativity to build, because, you know, who wants to watch Chelsea lose games, especially when it's happening on a weekly basis? Especially
in the manner of those last few games. I think that there has been a real lack this season of joy watching Chelsea, and I think you have to include Tuchel's last few games within that as well. I think already people are trying to revise history a bit with those first few weeks of the season. There were some dreadful displays that made it really unfun watching Chelsea in the first few weeks of the season. I mean, how many games this season? I mean, we've both of us have watched all of the games. How many have been really convincing wins? I mean, I can think of maybe one or two. Maybe the AC Milan home win. I mean, I know people will probably caveat the AC Milan away win, Wolves at home. I mean, on scoreline, there could be some more emphatic wins, but I think there's been few games where I've come out of it really infused about Chelsea and what they're doing, the direction they're going in. And I think it's very difficult for fans, even who are a bit tired about this year, but want to be a little bit more open-minded to Graham Potter and want to see him do well, don't want to see him fail. When they're seeing the Arsenal performance, when I was at that game, we were both at that game, how miserable it was and how little optimism there was against a bitter rival who Chelsea have got used to beating at Stamford Bridge, and seeing the polar opposite of moods around both sets of supporters that day. Newcastle, the lack of optimism there. I think the Man City defeat, I don't want to get used to saying, you know, Chelsea losing, I'm getting used to Chelsea losing, but that's a defeat I think more people can take, because you can look at it and go, Chelsea created good opportunities. On another day, if we take our chances, it goes in a different direction. There was, I think I referenced like multiverse, right? There was like there's no multiverse for me, or no like alternative game in the Arsenal and Newcastle one. It's either a draw or we lose. Like there's no, I couldn't see in either of those games how Chelsea win, because we didn't create many opportunities. And I think the point you make about people not really knowing what to do about Chelsea at the moment, you know, I referenced in a piece about Star Wars and like how I think there's a conflict of generations around Star Wars fans at the moment. Like some are clinging on to the nostalgia of the past, some want something new, some just want to have stuff referenced back to them constantly, or some are just done with it. And I think that very much relates to Chelsea. For Potter, I mean, I think the cultural battle is so huge. But when he does return, when we do return against Bournemouth on the 27th, I mean, what are those kind of key things that you're looking at the moment and sort of pinpointing and saying these are the things that he needs personally to improve on? Not just, we know the outside factors, we know the injuries, we know the tiring schedule, you know, all those things that have been thrown onto him that any coach, I think, would struggle to deal with. Just as a coach, from what you've analysed so far, what do you think of those key things he needs to improve on at Chelsea?
Well, I think, firstly, I am going to say, you know, I think you and I are probably more of the same view that this is going to be a process, and we've kind of accepted that is going to take time. However, within that, I do think Graham Potter has to improve in certain aspects. As you say, I don't think he's completely blameless and doesn't, you know, get a free pass for Chelsea's defeats recently. But I think probably one of the big things that I genuinely believe he needs to do, and this isn't necessarily it's not particularly a coaching thing, it's more how he presents himself as the head coach of Chelsea Football Club. Graham Potter is, by all accounts, you speak to anyone around Chelsea, around the training ground, you know, he's a very nice man. His staff are very good people. There is a very open atmosphere being fostered down at Cobham in that first team building, which, look, let's not pretend it's been the case with every Chelsea head coach. I mean, there's, you know, been far more combative personalities in that first team building who have put people on edge. But with Graham Potter, that doesn't appear to be the case at all. However, to be the head coach of Chelsea Football Club, I do think he has to take a bit more of an authoritative approach with things. Maybe dial down the complete honesty. You know, no Chelsea fan wants to watch them be completely outplayed by Arsenal and then hear that, well, you know, Arsenal deserve to win that. Fair play to them. Good luck. You have to, and look, Thomas Tuchel would always speak the truth as well, but he spoke it in a way that didn't necessarily undermine Chelsea. Look, he spoke many times about Manchester City being ahead of Chelsea, but Chelsea closing the gap for 90 minutes. And there are ways to talk about the truth that don't probably undermine you as Chelsea head coach, and I think that's something that Potter has to improve on. I think he has to try and settle upon a team that he wants to take forward for the rest of the season. And I think he has to try and settle upon a structure. There may be some difficulties doing that depending on injuries, and we don't know quite yet how players will come back from the World Cup. But the chopping and changing, it's not working well just yet. So I think he probably does have to settle upon a system that may not be his ideal system, may not be exactly how he wants Chelsea to play in the next 2 and 3 years, but it's probably going to be enough to get Chelsea to a certain level this season, hopefully top 4, get results. And then in the summer, there's going to be a lot of big decisions to make, of course, about this squad, but get to that summer point and then start to maybe, you know, begin the revamp in earnest, because Chelsea can't keep losing games every week, because it is just going to put more and more pressure on him, even though at the moment all the indications are that Boehly and Todd Boehly are very much in this for the longer haul with him.